morning. Hello, everyone. Thank you. It's so nice to see such a full house on a Friday morning. I hope you all had a good week and have great weekend plans ahead of you. My name is JJ Keller. I'm the Executive Director for the Women's Fund. We'll use the mic today just in case there's anybody that has any challenges hearing. And we are recording today's presentation, so just so everybody knows that. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can write your question down and we will personally answer it for you. So really excited to be here. This is called Connection Matters, and Women's Fund created this last year really as an opportunity for all of us to come together and connect on issues facing women and girls in our community. And we really want to connect all of you. Today our topic is reimagining childcare. So just a quick poll. How many are parents, grandparents of kiddos who are currently in childcare or need childcare? 8. How many are in the childcare industry? Do we have any childcare industry folks here today? Fabulous. How about employers? Anybody here representing their employer to figure out how they can? Wonderful. Yep. And please raise your hand multiple times. And then how many are here because they really care about this issue and they think it's important for our community? Everybody. Otherwise, you might want to be here, right? So, couple housekeeping things. Bathrooms are out the door to the right and then a quick left. Men, women, and gender neutral. Choose the one that works best for you. Snacks, bagels, coffee, and I'm going to push the juice boxes. Come on, guys. Not many people took juice boxes. We're talking about childcare. Juice boxes. So don't leave us with a horse of juice boxes. But feel free to take that even on your way out as well. So to get us started, and really to set the stage for what we are going to be talking about today, I'm thrilled to welcome these 3 amazing women to really share their story of their journey with childcare. So Rachel, I met through the Starting Point program for single moms. So she's a mom and now no longer single, recently married, a couple of kids, and also working in the childcare industry. Candice is the amazing team of the JJ Keller Foundation. And I heard her speak about her childcare journey in a different presentation. I thought she just really had great messages to share. Carolyn is my colleague here at the Community Foundation. And is not only a mom, but an advocate as well for childcare and a lot of other issues. So I'm going to turn it over to them and they're going to tell our story. We are going to save questions till the very end because we have members of the Childcare Alliance here. So I want to make sure that we get everybody in and then we'll have a good chunk of time for questions at the end. Okay, Rachel, do you want to get us started?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Hi guys, can you hear me? Okay, my name is Rachel. I actually, Julie, I'm no longer in the childcare industry, but I was for a while. I started out just as a single mom trying to find childcare. I started out in a normal daycare that had my son move to an in-home daycare, and then now he is both my kids actually. My husband watches them during the day. I watch during the day. He watches them during the night. I apologize. I did work at Lake Edge Learning Center in Neenah for about a year and a half when I needed the childcare and could not really afford. It was pretty difficult actually. They offered free childcare for their teachers, and I was like, that is a perfect opportunity to get to know child development more, as well as have childcare for my kiddos. Before that, I had been with a in-home, and she was perfect. She was great. She was pretty affordable. But as soon as I quit my job in Oshkosh, I had to find somewhere else. So I had my sisters help me watch my kids until we found a solution with the job that I had. It is quite expensive, but I ended up leaving that job only because they moved me down to part-time instead of full-time, and they didn't offer the discount for part-time. So it ended up being more than what I actually made. That is why I'm really working at a different job. But I'm here for everybody, and honestly, I can answer all the questions about the childcare industry as well. So
Good morning, everyone. So my story is a little bit different. So my husband and I, we were engaged in 2021. We were set to be married on September 10th. And then we found out we were due on September 10th. So talk about a wild turn of events. And so right in 2021, that was still in the very beginning of the COVID shortage or shutdowns of many of the childcare centers. And right away, 3 months, I knew, okay, I knew my unpaid leave time. I knew what that plan was going to be. We started looking for childcare right away. We had hired an in-home nanny. She was part-time and she was going to be splitting households between myself and another family. And then had called us at 5 months pregnant that she lost her position with the family and she was getting a full-time job. So back to back to the drawing board. So we started calling centers, kind of just going down a list of a radius of where we lived. That didn't work. I ended up working with Child Care Resource and Referral, phenomenal team, but as I always say, you can navigate as so far as you can, but if there's not centers, it's not going to help. We called 25 centers, in-home and actual centers. Sorry, I don't know the correct term for that. But we ended up finding a location outside of the town that we lived in, but we couldn't get in until he was 5.5 months. So that really changed our plans again. Thankfully, at that time, I worked for an employer that allowed me to extend my unpaid leave, but we still had 1.5 months of trying to figure out what are we going to do. And please know, like my husband and I reflect from day one till now, like we had a very privileged position to do this. First of all, we had a supportive relationship where we thought, wow, the number of single moms or single parents that might be looking for childcare, because I cannot tell you the amount of childcare centers that told me, well, you should have been calling me when you were planning on having a baby. Well, you need to be planning for these families. Well, obviously that wasn't our story. We were planning on getting married. So that was challenging. And, even fast forward to today, ironically enough, we are in a fertility journey, and even the feedback from our center now is we need to know when. I can't tell you when that's going to happen. And that just is very frustrating, kind of adds to that emotional level of what we're currently experiencing. But anyway, so when I say we were privileged, we knew we had some family members that could help us kind of in that intermediate time for 1.5 months. And without going into specifics, families can be wonderful and families can be rather damaging. And that was a very traumatic time for my family. My son was going through some very significant health issues. So that wasn't a space where we felt like this is a healthy environment for him to be in. And so really challenging. Like it's easy to sit here and tell you my story, but it's also a space where we go, look, we can afford the childcare with our current, family unit. And we recognize that how many people out there can't, right? That's a place of privilege. And it's still a very traumatic story for us. Like I said, luckily we landed in our childcare center now. I'd like to say that story is over. But just for you to understand, as we talk about how it's so intertwined in our lives, how that's affecting us now. I used to work full time. I was lucky enough to move to a part-time position. For me, that was a personal choice to be able to actually have some time with my son, especially after his health journey. I'm lucky enough to have a husband whose position allows us financially to do that. But at the same time, you choose. You go from full-time daycare, you are in part-time daycare now. There is no choice going back. So how that's affecting our lives now is that, for a very long time, we've been enrolled in the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. That eligibility to continue in that program is working 30 hours a week. My current schedule is 24. However, that doesn't include the time of getting to daycare, drop off, pick up. And so that really would push us into the full-time schedule, and that's not a possibility. So currently, it's another kind of hurdle for our family to say, okay, now what? Like, we've been working towards this, and now we kind of hit this stopping point. And The only other thing I'll say is I think we all need to recognize, and what you need to share too, is that especially for someone who is experiencing this fertility journey, we have to plan how many children we have based on what we can afford. And if that isn't backwards, I don't know what is. And my husband and I talk about that all the time. We have family members who, luckily enough, were able to have 3-4 children, and they're paying 3 times the amount of their mortgage to have those children in childcare. So when we look at decisions that we're making, either politically or, as a local economy or as local teams, we have to understand that this is so multifaceted. It's not just a bunch of moms up here talking about, hey, I got childcare. No, I didn't get childcare. It's just that one hump that you have to get over. It's a continuous, it just continually affects your life day in and day out. And I am very, very appreciative of a flexible employer, because, what we deal with now is a local daycare who we're very lucky that they are actually church-based, right? So that church carries that financial burden of that center, but we still have a lot of staffing issues. So, just last week, my son was teething. I mean, that's really nothing, right? Had to pull him out for 2 days. They didn't have the staff to cover that. So again, speaking from a place of privilege, understanding I have an opportunity not only to work part-time, to have a flexible environment to handle that, but I know that 99% of the other communities don't. And so I don't take that lightly, but I also really feel like we need to listen to that and see that and understand that's truly a huge piece even of just your workforce and a continued workforce.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really grateful to be a part of this conversation. I'm from Appleton, lived in Appleton my whole life, and realized what a great place to be to raise a family. So met my husband in Haiti, and he moved here in 2013 and became a full-time student for the next 6 years. None of his credits transferred over, so he really had to start his educational journey over. And my story is going to sort of paint a picture of childcare for our family pre-COVID, post-COVID, because I think that continues to impact our communities and impact childcare. But also just through those life changes when you're trying to accomplish different goals. You're one of those middle income families that made too much to qualify for subsidies, but not really enough to get by. In 2016, we were expecting our first child, and by all accounts, we were super lucky. We found a 5-star childcare, a KinderCare, with an open infant spot, just 5 minutes from our apartment. So lucky. And hearing that many teachers had been there for 10, 20 years, I felt really confident about having my daughter in care there. I felt like we hit the jackpot. I optimistically signed her up for full-time care because that would give my husband the most space to study. He worked part-time also throughout his full-time student journey. I worked full-time, thinking that we could afford it. And pretty quickly, I realized we couldn't. And we were able to go down to 3 full days a week because my mom, who lives in the area, who is sort of a hero through my story, you'll see those family support systems are critical. So for people who don't have them, let's keep that in mind. She was able to take my daughter Tuesdays and Thursdays. She changed her work schedule so she could watch my daughter, and then she was in care the other 3 days a week. And so for a few years, that worked really well. We kind of had the best of both worlds, I called it. We had the structured time at KinderCare with other children, with a curriculum, and we had one-on-one time with grandma, which worked well. Fast forward to 2020. Of course, we all know how devastating the pandemic was for our communities, and especially families with children and to child care providers. Like many in the early days of COVID, our center closed. And by that time, my mom had retired. So we were able to balance working from home with my daughter some of the time or her going to my mom's. We returned her to care 6 months into the pandemic, so it took a while for the center to reopen, to have space for us to feel comfortable having her go back. And I have to say they did an amazing job of managing COVID amidst all the challenges. And we did our best to hold on when we had those unexpected closures, right? There was an exposure, you had to quarantine, might be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, all that. But I'm also very lucky to have an employer that provides some flexibility. I really don't know what I'd do without that. We decided to have a second child around that same time. My husband had graduated, I had a good job, he had a good job, we're ready to have a second child. We were trying to plan that thoughtfully. And hearing from friends how hard childcare was to find, I told our center director that we were pregnant before I even told my family or coworkers or anyone else. That was the most important thing. And they didn't really have a spot, but because we were a family there and we'd been there at that point for like 4 years, they put us in for a spot. So again, got lucky. Our son was born in June of 2021, and he started at KinderCare a few months later. I returned to full-time work. And then I realized the burden of having 2 children in childcare financially. Thankfully, my daughter was old enough to go to half-day 4K through the Appleton School District. So we went down to half days at KinderCare. But in 2021, with my daughter in half days for part of the year and my son only in care like 3 months of the year, we still paid over $17,000 for childcare, which is far more than our mortgage and car payments combined. The only reason I think we didn't go bankrupt was because of the monthly child tax credit payments that really kept us afloat. We really relied on that. During this period, I also learned what a juggling act it is to transfer a kiddo from care half day to the 4K half day while being a mom of an infant, while working full time. I was still breastfeeding at that time, so pumping at work. It's actually during this time that I learned the art of pumping in the car while driving. And I guess there's somebody out there who's done it. It's very interesting, especially when you come to a stop and you just really hope the person next to you doesn't look into your vehicle. If they do, hopefully don't know them because they'll just go on their way. But ultimately, I really couldn't keep that up. So I had to give up my goal of breastfeeding my son to a year, like I did for my daughter. I only made it 6 months. All that time, the COVID disruptions continued, right? Classrooms or the full center would close unexpectedly. Until one night in January of 2022, I'll never forget, I was up late feeding my son, who was 8 months at the time, just feeling exhausted and frankly angry because the Omicron variant was peaking at that time, and my son's classroom closed for 2 full weeks due to the number of cases, leaving my partner and I to juggle full-time work and caregiving, which is just an impossible task. Like, there's really no such thing as balance, I don't think, right? It's a word to try to make us feel like we can attain something. You can't. So I sat there rocking my son, wondering how it was possible that we were in the middle of the worst spike in cases in our area, at least. But supports like the paid leave that was available the prior year was gone. The child tax credit payments were gone. And I just felt like our society had completely abandoned families with young children. I felt like we learned anything, during the prior years of suffering. And it was in this moment that my anger turned into action. And with my son in one hand and my phone in the other, I started Googling master's programs in public administration because I wanted to go back to school to learn why the system was so broken, how to fix it. I wanted to know who was making these policy decisions and why they were leaving families in the dust. Months later, I started my master's in public administration online through Claremont Lincoln University. And though getting my master's while working full-time and parenting 2 young children has been probably the greatest challenge of my life, I'm excited to say that I'm on track to finish my degree this summer, likely with a 4.0 pending my last. And I've made childcare policy a really big emphasis of my studies. And that's really helped inform me to kind of transition into that advocate role. We've talked about the high cost of care, and as much as I feel like I can't pay a single cent more in childcare, I currently pay $1,340 a month for a single child in full-time care. It pains me to know that the amazing childcare workers who take such great care of my child every day are probably making $13 an hour. And I feel in my core how morally wrong that is every time I drop off my child. The work they do has so much more value. KinderCare is like our second family, and it just kills me that our childcare workers, who, by the way, have more continuing education requirements than a doctor, are not making a living wage. Our center that once had many longtime staff now has near constant turnover and vacancies. Several classrooms are closed or not as full as they could be. On a semi-regular basis, they have to ask families to volunteer to keep their kids out of care because they can't make ratios. They do offer us a tuition credit, but it might happen at a moment's notice. Sorry, today we can't have your child in care because someone is sick, and that's how thin the layer of backup is. And we've still been lucky. And I know that because we have friends whose centers have cut hours, cut days, or just closed altogether. So I know that we're still very lucky to have the care that we do. So to bring my story to a close, I want us to think kind of about the big picture of the current situation for families in childcare. In the last 7 years, my family has spent $97,000 on childcare. I totaled it up last night and was kind of horrified. For 2 children. My son has at least another year and a half of full-time care, then part-time. So that will be another 25 to 30 grand. So I anticipate investing almost $130,000 in my children's early care and education. And I do think of it as an investment. I know it will pay off because these early years are so important. But sometimes I do think about all the other things we could be doing with that money as a young family. Again, my husband was working or as a student during much of this time. Our childcare costs delayed our ability to purchase a home. We have any real savings to pay off debt. So think of all the young families like ours in this area and how broken the system is that's keeping these families from thriving, from fully engaging in the workforce, from having any kind of safety net, from owning a home, or from investing in their own education. Think about the mental and emotional stress of not knowing how you're going to pay the bills and still wanting your child to get really good care, whether that's from you or from in-home or in a center. You care so much about what you want for your children. And let's face it, think of all the women not earning their full potential or abandoning careers. Careers they care about. I care about my career. I want to work because childcare is not available or affordable. Now think of the hundreds of talented childcare teachers caring for our next generation who know they could make more money if they took a starting wage at Target and have to do a lot less work. Families and childcare providers deserve better than this. Thanks.
Thank you all. That was really set the stage very eloquently for what we are going to be talking more about today. And I want to stress, childcare is not a women's issue, right? We're not here because this is a women's issue, but it disproportionately impacts women. Carolyn alluded to a lot of those reasons why. It is mainly women who choose or have to adjust their hours, if they work, when they work, how much they work. And that not only impacts them during that time when they may not be working, that impacts their financial future through retirement. Women have less retirement balances than men do. Because if you leave the workforce earning like the time, you're not saving in your 401k, you're not getting your match, you're not paying into Social Security. When you go back to work, you're probably not going to be at the levels that you were when you left. So this is where, when we ask women to stay home and take care of kids, we're asking them to really risk their financial future, including into retirement. So we know this isn't just it's just temporary and not a big deal. This impacts women long into the future. And as Carolyn alluded to, you set this up so nicely. It's going to be women working in these jobs who you can go to Target and make more money right now. You can get a job at Target, you can start tomorrow, or Cook Shop, or any of those places, make more money, have less stress. And we know a lot of those businesses as well are offering benefits to their part-time workers. Like we heard that, if you go to part-time in childcare, you lose a lot of those benefits. So that is why we are here, and that is why the Women's Fund is so passionate about this issue, and so fortunate that we have the Alliance here. Our community and our region, we don't shy away from these issues. We just look at them and we go for it, and we say we got to come together and we need to find a solution. And that's really what the Fox Valley Childcare Alliance is doing. So I'm thrilled to have Lynn and Suzanne here as leaders of this movement, really to talk about what's actually happening. Things are happening, and we're not just talking about it. We're actually there's actually things happening in our community, in our region, to address this issue. So they're going to talk about what they've been doing, what the Alliance has been doing, and most importantly, how you all can get involved in ways that you can also make an impact, because you are all here because you care about this issue. So thank you, ladies. Boxes.
Lynn and I have been known to talk for a really long time on this. So we are going to set a timer and try and stay on script. We both have our notes, so like to be here.
Good morning. My name is Lynn Coriano, and I wear two hats. I'm the executive director of the Basic Needs Giving Partnership, and we also convene the Greater Fox Valley Childcare Alliance. So I'm wearing my Greater Fox Valley Childcare Alliance hat today. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. And I'm Suzanne Brault, and I am a consultant right now working in advocacy, cross-sector partnerships, and really with a deep passion for childcare, early childcare, and education. I'm a mother of 4 and grandmother of 2. So experiencing some trauma listening to the stories you guys, remembering breastfeeding down the road and all of the sick babies. So lovely.
And just listening to the story. So I don't have kids. I'm extremely passionate about this issue. My first job was working in an in-home childcare center in Denver, Colorado. And I worked there for 7 years through high school and parts of college. And I remember a mom standing in the driveway. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but hearing Carolyn's story, I remember the first time this mom was dropping off her child to childcare, right? And she's standing, she brings her child in, I'm watching from the house, and she's in the driveway just bawling, right? Like just not wanting to leave her child. Right, and you heard 3 stories today, and there are thousands of stories across the region of families who are doing this patchwork system of trying to make this work for them. And we are fortunate to be in this role of trying to amplify the message and help people understand what's really going on here. But first, I just want to acknowledge when I moved to this area, it'll be 8 years in August, that the first summer I was here, there was the Theta Care did a plunge, and it was on early care and education. And I remember I went on the bus ride. I remember going to the Y, and Danny was talking about this issue back then and saying, we hire people to go through the program. They're certified. They have all the credentials. They're excited to be, this is what they want to do. They want to work with kids. And, 6 months into the job, they're like, we can't afford our bills. We can't make it. And they go and work as a teller at the bank, right? So we're losing, as Carolyn said, people who are going to school, getting college credentials, getting all this education, and coming out and earning 10, 11 bucks an hour back then, and not able to stay in the field that they want to be in. When I first took my job in home, this is the mid 80s, $3.35 an hour, and which was minimum wage at the time. And we spoke at the Joint Finance Committee budget listening session last year where I told that story. And at the time, there's data that the starting salary for some folks was $7 an hour currently. You think about all the expenses, right? You think about housing, healthcare, right? The cost of living, and how wages just haven't kept up with that. So I just want to acknowledge that there have been many organizations, some folks in this room who have been beating this drum for years. And we are really standing on the shoulders of them. I feel like the baton gets passed along, right? And it's our turn to shine a light on this issue. I do feel like there are certain circumstances at play that I'm really hopeful that we're going to actually see some traction. And unfortunately, it isn't because we have the women you heard talking about this issue, right, and have been experiencing this for years, but that we actually have employers who are feeling the pain, right, who are not able to attract talent, not able to retain folks, and we're feeling that. And even if you don't have kids, like you're probably feeling this in ways that you don't actually realize, which Suzanne is going to talk a little bit about later. So I just want to say, right, that while there are many organizations working on this issue as individual organizations, the Y, First by Fox Valley, Achieve Brown County, one organization alone isn't going to fix this issue. And it's going to take all of us in this room, the public, plus business, plus philanthropy, plus government to come together to really support a plan that has a systemic impact, that isn't the burden is not on individual families to try and figure this out. It's on how can we create a system that every family can access what they need. And so that is part of the thinking, right? That we can't do this alone. That helped form the Greater Fox Valley Child Care Alliance back in the summer of 2020. And we cover a 10-county region, basically from Oconto County to Winnebago. Start the timer. Okay. Sure. Where we're at. Okay. So at that time, I was convening a group focused on strategies to support female head of households, because the Basic Needs Giving Partnership is really focused on poverty alleviation, elimination, and we know that single women with children are disproportionately in poverty in our region as well as nationally. And we know that in order for women with children to work and provide for their families, they need access to affordable and high quality care. So we entered this work with other funders who knew that philanthropy at the time was not going to be able to solve all the challenges that were coming with COVID, right? This is 2020. We didn't look at it. There were efforts to supply childcare centers with hand solution, right? Disinfecting solution, like all hands were on deck. And we reached out to organizations across the region, many in this room, worked on various issues of early care, whether that's brain development strategies, parent support, child care providers, resource and referral services, and asked if they would be interested in building capacity around advocacy in this area. And the answer was overwhelmingly yes. And that's when our journey began. And we've learned a ton, right? And Suzanne and I can talk a lot about this work, all day. We could be here. We could make your eyes glaze over with depressing statistics about the cost of care, about closures. But we really want to leave folks here today with hope and possibility that all of us in this room and beyond have the opportunity to create something different starting now. So the Greater Fox Valley Child Care Alliance is a network of partners across Northeast Wisconsin working together to advance a shared vision for children and families. And you can see our vision up there. Our role as the alliance is, we're not a service provider. We work to align. I think the next slide we'll talk. Perfect. We work to align and coordinate local and regional efforts. We provide technical assistance. So we've been doing a lot of research. We've been sharing what we're learning from other states, other policies, bringing folks together and understanding how might we try those things in our region. So we really dug deep to understand the issue, identified priorities. You've got a little handout on your chair. But when we talked about where we should focus first, access, affordability, what we continued to hear from providers was that it's about the wages, right? That we can build more childcare centers, employers can provide subsidies to their employees to help cover the cost, but those subsidies aren't helpful if the slots aren't there to begin with in the first place. And the slots aren't there because the wages are so low, and in some cases, poverty wages without benefits. So we've been slowly building a network across the region. We've hosted design sessions. We have traction right now with 2 action groups, and we're working to build a 3rd. Action group 1 is really about advocating for sustainable community-driven funds to support childcare operations and increase workforce wages. That group meets monthly. I'm happy to say that Carolyn is part of that work group and has been a really strong advocate for us and connecting us to other resources across the state and the region. Our Action Group 2 is actually hosted by the Greater Green Bay Chamber of Commerce. They are convening a group in Green Bay, employers, to work on how can we engage employers in this conversation to help them thinking about how can they recruit and retain their talent. And then Action Group 3 is in development. We're really hoping to engage providers, actual childcare providers, in this conversation so that they can help identify and design solutions that work for them. Many of our alliance members advocated for ARPA dollars in their municipalities and were successful. And we have business at the table in ways that I haven't experienced before in the 8 years that I've been here. And so why does this issue, I think, have staying power now than it did in the many times people before have been working on this issue? It's because everybody's feeling it, right? And employers are feeling it, big and small. And I think right now there's a willingness to come to the table and listen and understand what's actually happening in a way that wasn't there before. And we've had a little roadshow about going to, right, county economic development corporations have asked us to come and speak. We've presented to the New North Board. And we're wanting to really, as Julie said, create this movement where people are really understanding the mechanics of what's working. And I think we debated whether we were going to come here and like show you our systems map and tell you all the like complexity around, and there's time for that, but we didn't want to talk about that today. But I truly believe that as a society, like we are at a critical juncture to decide how we want to invest in our future, how we want to take care of each other and invest in our future, in our families and our communities. And while we are talking about childcare today, this is the care industry in general, right? If you have older parents that need elder care, some of the same dynamics are happening there. So we're really talking about how do we think about care as a society and how do we value care differently than we have? And what we really think about childcare as infrastructure, it is critical infrastructure, just like we invest in roads as infrastructure for people to get to work. We need to be investing in childcare as critical infrastructure for people to get to work. And it's not, let me just emphasize while we're talking about work, it's not just about work, right? As Candice said, as Carolyn said, as Rachel said, like there are choices that families are making, whether they want to be in care or not. And we want people to have those choices with no shame, with no blame, to do the right thing for their family. And so this isn't an individual family's burden to solve. It's all of us coming together to understand the issue. And we can do better. We can do better. Time.
We're doing great. So I'm going to talk today, I'm going to try and talk on 4 points. I want to speak about advocacy, identify some of the local efforts that we've been engaged with, touch quickly on some of the efforts that are happening in other states, and then we recently saw an article that is identifying the 3 main commonalities that are really helping to move this moment along. So what I want to talk about a little bit too also is, why does this matter to everyone? Lynn, we've already identified, right? It's parents, it's providers, it's employers. But I will say it is oftentimes hard to get people to understand the complexity of this issue, right? I raise my children. Why would it matter to me anymore? Why this is important? And oftentimes people really lose sight of the ripple effect. We are hearing, just as an example, we are hearing repeatedly from the healthcare industry how challenging it is right now to recruit and to either retain their staff that they need. And when you are a cancer patient and when you are needing treatment and the oncologist that was being heavily recruited to come into your community has learned that she can't possibly work in your community because she can't find childcare, it is impacting all of us. So delivering that message and spreading that idea or that construct of how important this value is to all of us, to our society, is really important. So I want to touch on advocacy, and we often stumble off, over the definition of advocacy. And I think I'm pretty safe in this room that everybody has pretty much the general gist of the idea, but I did kind of what everybody does, and I went to Google to look at the definitions that were there. And there were a whole bunch to pick from. And I have to admit, at first, my eyes kind of glazed over and I was like, ew, I'll read you the two that I decided I really, really didn't care for. Merriam-Webster, the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. And then dictionary.com, the act of pleading for, supporting, or recommending. I was like, nope, this is not this time, especially right now, that last one. This is not a time for pleading or passive recommending, right? We're way past that. So I was looking for more, in other words, what definition best captures this moment in our desire and our drive to create system change for the provision of childcare that better meets the needs of children, families, and those who care for them, and supports women as equal participants in the labor force. So I took the liberty of choosing these three definitions that I felt best capture the energy of the movement that we are building. So Wikipedia, they get a point. Advocacy is an activity by an individual or group that aims to influence decisions within political, economic, and social institutions. And then I really liked these two from grassroots efforts that are trying to build that momentum. Advocacy means taking action to create change. Advocates organize themselves to take steps to tackle an issue. They help to give people ways to speak out. And the last one, advocacy is the process of taking public action to create positive change in support of a cause or group of people. And those resonated much more strongly with me. We are all advocates, and the Alliance is a network of partners trying to broaden that conversation. And you taking the time to be with us in this room today, you're part of this conversation, and you are advocates and serving in this space. So we are all working to learn more about how to engage in problem solving and taking action to support our kids and families, and really looking at this important critical workforce that historically we have not valued, as we've talked about before, and we have not identified it as an investment that really is critical and crucial to our children and our children's future, as well as our own. So central to this work is the power and importance of building strong relationships with people and organizations that intersect with our mission. We have strong partners in this work, as Lynn has already identified. Many you'll recognize: First Five Fox Valley, CCR&Rs, WICA, Wisconsin Early Childhood Association, and we are establishing cross-sector partnerships to educate, join efforts to seek solutions, and support sustained statewide investment in early childhood initiatives. This is the stumbling block that nobody wants to talk about. We need to find sustained funding and investment in this critical sector for Wisconsin children and families. Childcare needs, childcare need and efforts to find solutions to this crisis are happening in every community in every state. This conversation, we actually were privileged to hear. We had a presentation yesterday, Danny and Julie, we were in a presentation yesterday from a woman with Project Promise in Ohio. And they had recently conducted a research project where they had developed a project where they were able to boost wages for providers in socioeconomically challenged areas, and were able to demonstrate what the positive impact of that. It was a limited time period, but it was so interesting that the results and the information they were getting, you could have picked, that study would have popped right over here, and there were the same learnings that they were able to share. And it was honestly a little unnerving to be sharing this and knowing that these stories are happening across the country. There's power in that, but there's also, I'm going to say, great challenge and frustration that this is continuing to occur and we need to do something about it. So regionally, I want to talk just a little bit on some of the exciting projects and conversations that we can highlight. And this is a little dangerous. I want to identify that there is much work being done throughout our region, and I'm just going to highlight a few examples of innovation that is happening. So Waupaca County is doing tremendous community building. I had a long conversation yesterday and have been watching them develop a really strong team of community partners that are addressing workforce needs, including transportation, housing, and childcare. They have strong relationships with their industries in their countywide. And in addition to leveraging ARPA funds and some state grants such as Dream Up, they have taken the next step to conduct research with providers and identifying wage support as a key need. They have secured the necessary county, city, and school district agreements, as well as partnerships with their employers. And they're set, actually, I think they're just about ready to sign the papers, but they are set to establish a first of its kind, I believe in our state, a community fund through the Community Foundation here. And Carolyn has been working very hard on supporting those efforts, and we're really excited. There are certainly many, many steps to come with that. Whoop, there we go. With that to come, but it is really a unique approach, and so we're excited to see what continues there. The Alliance continues to work to engage businesses and economic development organizations, as Lynn had noted, and we've been working to support the Greater Green Bay Chamber of Commerce. They will be convening a statewide child care summit in September. Now, the summit is being modeled on the National Business Leaders in Action Summit that was held in Colorado last fall. I think last September, and it is designed to engage business leaders who are committed to addressing and resolving the child care crisis in our state. This is a very powerful and important step in terms of bringing that business community into this conversation. And I will, okay, I'm going to do an aside, so this is not in the notes, but one point I will note about the business community is, and this is part of, I think, what can be so challenging in understanding, is you've heard discussion about it, a broken market, failure. And the bottom line is that the cost of high quality care is expensive, and it's more than the customer can afford. The parents right now are the only ones that are having to pay for the cost of this care. So the business community will often see, bless their hearts, will often see, right, that they can, and with, they will see you have this broken model. We can come in and we can fix it. We can give you these lean principles. We can, and they really have the best of intentions and really do desire and want to be able to afford that. What they don't understand is the nature of the system and the fact that there is, it's in many ways, you need numbers. You need numbers of children. That's where you still see very strong providers in our community, but they tend to be larger centers and larger operations because they have the volume that they can make this numbers game work. So part of the work that we are doing is to disabuse them of that notion and let them know that this workforce is highly educated, works very hard, and is working every day to improve and increase their own understanding of shared services and business supports that can help them run a better business. So that's been part of the work that I would say we are doing is very, I don't want to say gently, but insistently working with the business community to try to give this additional information to them. We had, Lynn touched on a little bit, we had an opportunity that we've been working on and we're really pleased to secure is to do a presentation with the New North Board of Directors. So Ruth Schmidt, the Executive Director of WICA, Eric Vanden Heuvel, VP of Talent and Education at the Greater Green Bay Chamber, and Lynn Coriano, Executive Director of Basic Needs Giving Partnership. And they spoke to the urgency of childcare need, local and regional actions, and then this need for advocacy. We really need the business community to step up in terms of understanding this issue and helping us advocate to support, again, that sustained state revenue for early care and education. And lastly, I'm running out of time. Lastly, I can share that Encompass Childcare and another alliance partner up in Green Bay, they are going to be receiving the Wisconsin Rural, they've been notified. They have received the Wisconsin Rural Partners Award for a top rural development initiative. And this is a partnership of Oconto County Economic Development, Encompass Childcare, and Oconto County Public Health. And they are bringing a new child care center to Oconto Falls that will serve 140 children's care and education needs. And Oconto County was identified as you'll hear the term regulated child care desert. And so this was a critically needed delivery of care in that region. So
Let me just say, with the Encompass expansion, they had a wait list before they even opened their doors. And they're unique in that they've been around for over 100 years. They actually have reserves, and they reallocated some of their reserves in order to increase wages for their staff. And so they already have staff that they can pay that rate, and they have staff at their current facilities that actually live in that community that have been commuting down to Green Bay that can now stay up in that community. But they're a unique organization that has been around for a long time and has those reserves and is able to do that.
So I'll quickly touch on what is happening in other states, because again, Wisconsin, each state is unique. There was a recent article early this month in Early Learning Nation called How 5 States Are Stepping Up to Alleviate the Childcare Crisis. And they identified key strategies that most of these states have in place to be successful. They were looking at, let me double check here. They looked at the end of 2023, they visited Michigan, Massachusetts, Vermont, Oregon, and New Mexico, and spoke with childcare teachers, providers, advocates, organizers, business leaders, and other experts to learn how they got to where they are now. For example, in Michigan, you may have heard of the model it's called TriShare, and that is a model where there's a partnership with government, business, and families to share the costs of childcare. In Oregon, leaders are tackling childcare access from several angles with a new statewide early childhood department at the helm. And in Massachusetts, the state is replacing federal relief dollars to avoid the childcare cliff, and localities are expanding pre-K. And lastly, in Vermont and New Mexico, recent legislative wins and identified funding sources set these states up to create universal early care and education systems. And so quickly, the 3 of the 4 commonalities that I want to highlight, number 1 was advocacy from the business community. States leading early childhood policy are doing so with support from their business communities. The second is grassroots organizing. That's all of us and the hard work that we're doing. And third was identifying and creating new funding streams. Early care and education is expensive. The cost is being subsidized now through high costs for parents and low wages for teachers, as we've identified. As state governments play a bigger role in covering that cost, we need to seek new sources of funding to help parents afford care and to raise teacher pay. Public investment is the missing piece of this puzzle. I want to close with a quote from U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who said, "It's way past time that we treat childcare as what it is, an element whose contribution to economic growth is as essential as infrastructure or energy."
Thank you. I'm going to ask the panelists to come back up here, and we'll pull another chair over, and then we have some time for some Q&A. So I know it was a lot to absorb today, and hopefully you've been writing some notes or questions down that you have. But if you want to come up here, we'll take questions for anybody on the panel.
I know that with some of your experience in policy, childcare counts and what happened in the fall. Can you guys talk about the impact that you've seen with that funding being or the eventual running out of it?
I think we have actually 2 providers in the room that I think could speak most powerfully to that. We have both Julie Stoffel and Virginia Moss, who could, I think, speak very directly to how. And Danny is over here from the Y, but we'll throw it up to the 3 of you to talk about how important that childcare counts money is.
Okay,
Thank you.
Today. I'm Julie Stoffel. I own Cradle to Cradle Learning Center. Really, I also work for the Wisconsin Early Childhood Association. I want to make a nod. Again, I have 2 jobs. So if that gives you an idea, and I think my dear friend Virginia here owns a program as well, also has 2 jobs. Childcare counts, evolved out of the ARPA funding, and it is slowly, as I tell my staff and my families that attend our childcare program, is bleeding down. We're a larger center. It was a huge
chunk of money to come in at first, but really huge is not even, it barely covered staff wages and our operational costs. And we've taken more than a 50% cut over the last, I would say, 2 years. This latest one was we had one in January, and then we're facing another one again in August. What that has meant is pretty extreme rate increases for parents. Because what we did with that money is Virginia. I'm just leaning on Virginia because we did very similar. We used it to increase wages, create bonuses. We did everything that DCF really created to try to give us some to give us a little bit of extra to boost base, to be able to get teachers to stay. It did what it was supposed to do, but I need to say that wasn't enough. That was just enough. That isn't even close to what really is needed. So to speak to what Suzanne and Lynn are saying too, there needs to be that long-term investment, but we are set to exhaust that money. In June of 2025, Governor Evers he pulled up the couch cushions and found another $170 million in other department money to put towards that. But it is not it's more than a 50% reduction than where we were a year ago. So that in turn has created on these moms that you make me want to cry, because as a provider, we do not want to raise rates. It's not something we like to do, but we are in a position where we don't have a choice. If we want to keep the staff, if we want to keep the classrooms open, if we want to keep our teachers highly qualified, educated, keep our Young Star ratings up, and work with some lovely educational institutions. I see Kathy Meets over here. They feed us teachers the best they can, but there's a point where there's just not enough. So I hope that answers it. Do you want to add it?
I just want to add, I'm Virginia Moss, co-owner of Joyful Beginnings Academy in Hortonville, and we're a brand new center as of last year. And so we benefited greatly from this funding, as we had startup costs and things that we just hadn't accounted for when you're opening a center, because it's a pretty big operation between maintenance and licensing, insurance, and all the things. So we needed that money in order to recruit teachers. And we're over a year old now, and we still don't have enough teachers. And without that funding, we won't find them. We won't keep our teachers, and they are the heart of our business.
Add something to that. I can speak loud. I have a loud voice. I think it's super ironic too. So I mentioned earlier that the daycare that we go to is affiliated with a church. And so obviously being aware of the child counts credits and some of the work of the Alliance, I ask our director quite a lot of pressing questions that maybe some other parents don't. But the only way that they survived that was from the church membership. So council came to, and we're not a part of this church, like that's not even our denomination, but they went to the church membership and they started doing additional tithing specifically to support their bonus programs for their teachers. So they specifically used childcare counts to do a bonus structure rather than a wage increase, because that was the only way they thought sustainably they could do that. And so when that went away, they still had to keep those teachers at that rate. And now it's really shifting into, that is a community issue, because if you were a community member of that church and you were deciding to be able to give additional dollars of yours to tie to that church, that's going into the pot to feed those teachers' wages. So I just think it's another important funnel of how that's being impacted, because again, it's not just on the center, it's not just on the people, or excuse me, the parents, but also that community that's deciding to give an extra dollar to their church that's backing those additional bonus programs.
I just wanted to clarify, this is a workforce issue, right? We have been taking advantage of providers and this workforce for so long. This workforce is leaving, right? Or not wishing to enter the field any longer. My own personal story, my youngest daughter started school, loves children. She started school and learned that she would make more money as a nanny without a college degree, and which is what she's currently doing. And how could I argue with that? At that point, I'm, go to college, work all this. It wasn't working. Anyway, the point is this workforce will need to be rebuilt, right? They are highly educated, highly trained, meeting these requirements, but why? How can we honestly ask people to go into this field it is, as Carolyn noted before, it is a question of morality. We are not recognizing and valuing these providers for what they are delivering. And it's interesting because we're talking about workforce and economics, where for years, and really what is at the heart of this issue are really the needs of our children. We look at that, we all know the brain development, the rapid learning and importance of those early years that our providers and parents are working to. We need to focus there. And that is going to take, as Lynn will remind me, this is a long game, right? This is going to take concerted effort and investment and time to change the hearts and minds and help people understand how critically important this is for us to carry through.
I want to put into perspective, there were efforts to avoid sort of the cliff that we're facing with childcare counts. Senators spoke up, providers spoke up and said, this money has been critical. It can't go away. And it wasn't even really meeting all the need, right? So organizations around the state, advocates around the state, Raising Wisconsin, Weka Wiesen, Kids Forward, Amanda's here from Kids Forward, worked really hard. At one point, there were 300 advocates on Capitol Hill, or not Capitol Hill, but at the Capitol in Wisconsin to advocate for state funding, and it didn't pass. I think, there are a lot of issues where as individuals and communities were like, it's getting political, I'm gonna stay out of it. I don't really, someone else will fix it. And, I just want to really encourage everyone in this room to be as engaged as you can. I know it can be really overwhelming, but especially on issues that you care about, because, some of our legislators voted against bills that would have made a huge difference. And I think we need to speak up and be more engaged and be louder about the concerns that we have about how this is impacting our community, because there are people who know the issue is there and are trying to address it. And we weren't able to move it forward in the way that it could have. And so now these supports are ending. There's efforts at the federal level. President Biden in his first budget had universal, at least I think 3K and 4K in his budget, didn't pass. And I just want us to think too, like the issues we're facing don't have to be this way. There are other wealthy, educated first world countries in the world that provide early education, childcare, just like they do the K through 12 education system. We seem to have all sort of agreed that K through 12 is a public good. We want our kids to be educated, and we end up relying on the care that kids get while they're in school. And still, our K through 12 systems are often under-supported. But if we were to think about how is early care and education, could we move that idea forward? Could we provide longer leave, paid leave for folks so that they don't have to get childcare as soon as we do? A lot of families, it's 2 weeks, you get 2 weeks and you're looking for care. 2 months. I was lucky to get 3 months, right? Even with taking pay cuts. So just, be thinking about, it doesn't have to be this way. There are other policy solutions and there are other ways to do it.
Question? I have one. First, Lynn, when you said, I don't want to make you glazed over eyes, I was crying. I don't know if anybody else was crying. Newer mom, when you guys talked about Encompass, I work for a foundation and we just approved a grant to them this week for the Ocano room. And one of our board members, I was like so excited, like, are you so excited about this? I'm like, the reason you don't know why I'm so excited, that's a problem. And my question for you, you talked a lot about advocating. I feel like we're all here because we're trying to lean in. Is there a resource that shares when things are going to vote? What are events? Like how do we're here, how do we do better?
The key organizing arm and is Raising Wisconsin, and Raising Wisconsin is really has worked very, very intentionally on delivering that message, providing templates and letters for people to be able to deliver these messages to elected officials. We're certainly entering this time right now, right? Our legislative sessions have ended. We know that there is a lot of movement in terms of with the new maps, who's going to be running in which districts. It will be really important for us as advocates to speak to our current elected representatives as well as candidates in this space. I have to admit it's going to be a little challenging, I think, right now as we see some of those how we get into those lanes. And we're going to rely heavily, I believe, on Raising Wisconsin to help us in that guidance and putting forward. So we will be sharing, Julie, I believe, additional information with you following up our meeting today, and make sure that you can tap into that as well. But it's a huge important point that you raise.
And I think, so I went to Joint Finance Committee budget listening session. Suzanne and I got there at 8 in the morning and didn't speak until 4:30 in the afternoon for 3 minutes. It was my first time ever doing something like that. And I'm thinking, I don't have kids, like, what's my story gonna be? And I talked about working in a childcare center. And I think you may not think you have a story, but you have a story. And I think the more that you don't have to have like the perfect polished talking points. Raising Wisconsin has great resources to sort of think about how you can incorporate. But if you really just speak from your own personal experience and from your heart, like that is really what is going to help people. You know, that the legislators don't want to hear the token talking points over and over and over again. And that's important for them to hear, but also hearing like, how is it impacting individual people living in their districts is really important.
My own little plug too. There's a week in May that's Childcare Appreciation Week. If you're, if you're a parent or not, maybe you're just local in the community, go buy them lunch. You know, I literally, as you guys are talking, I'm like, I'm gonna go ask my husband if I could give our favorite childcare worker like money, because like, you know, it could be helpful. So
Don't ask.
Yes.
Slide it in the time to say.
As a parent, I hear other parents in my center talking about the stress, the financial stress and complaining. And I think there's a lack of understanding for a lot of parents about where their money's going and how much people are really making and what the issues really are. You know, like how they're raising the rates again, like they're just bleeding us dry. And as I've been able to talk with them and explain a little bit more, sometimes people's eyes open and they're like, oh, wow, I had no idea. Sometimes not really. But I feel like a missing piece is parents and parent advocates. And it's something I've been thinking a lot about. And if there are folks out there that are interested in talking about maybe some kind of parent advocate group, I think that could be really critical. You know, we're directly impacted. And honestly, if you get moms upset about something, there's really nothing we can't do. And I think it's just understanding what the core of the issue is and not that just, you know, someone's making a whole lot of money off of us. That is not the case. As we hear, you know, even center directors have multiple jobs. A lot of providers, the profit margin is 1%, 2%. No business can really, you know, survive on that. So I feel like if we could talk to more parents throughout the area about this issue, we could make a bigger difference.
Yes. So I just wanted to say, we've heard glancing nods to the family childcare world, where you had your children in-home care. The folks at the table here, the directors here are all from group programs. And I just want to name the importance of including family childcare in any and every strategy and thinking about unintended consequences when it comes to solutions like universal 4K. And if they are not involved in those programs are actually devastating. And so thinking through how complex, Susan keeps talking about this. So I just really want to hold up family childcare as part of this conversation because they are all in program with their kids right now.
And we saw that, Lynn and I were in Shawano recently for an economic development and chamber presentation, and we saw this dynamic playing out. There was a presentation of school district that is going to be partnering and offering, hearing from the community how much more capacity was needed. This is a challenge. People are responding to that. And then you had providers in the room who were talking about their challenges with fear of, and honestly, the reality of losing their staff to these new centers. And so Lynn was able to speak to, this is wrong. We should not be, we are putting people in position of competing with one another and taking from one another, which is an entirely impossible situation. So we need to keep in mind those unintended consequences.
Kathy, can you speak to, this might be a good segue, can you speak to Action Group 3 and where that is at?
Would you like to join us? Well, honestly, I'll let you do it.
So
we've struggled a little bit with this one because we don't want to duplicate any efforts that are out there. But as we've had conversations with folks with CCR&Rs in the region, they feel like they do bring some providers together, but it's for a different purpose. And this would be really like solutions oriented and co-design oriented. But as you've heard, right, from the providers, it's like they're working 2 jobs, right? And so we don't want to burden them too. So we're just trying to figure out what is the right mechanism. Is there enough interest? How could it be designed to support that in a way that's not overtaxing? And so we're still sort of in figuring that out. But if you are interested and want to help us try to figure that out.
And we welcome.
Go ahead. I was just gonna know parent engagement. Part of my work with NWICA is in the arm of Raising Wisconsin with the advocacy work. For very obvious reasons now, you know why I do that. We have parent advocates across the state, so we'll have to talk, but we
do a parent training.
Yeah, and we do parent trainings. And so thank you for saying provider appreciation. We really are, actually, you're going to see billboards going up across the state about thank a childcare provider today. Even not a nod to it's a day without childcare is May 13th. You're going to see a lot of providers down in Madison on May 13th. There's just a whole stretch of what we just ended Week of the Young Child. So we're transitioning from May 1st through May 13th with Provider Appreciation. Worthy Wage Day is another really big one to lift up the wages that need to be paid to these educators in our classrooms, and then ending. So there's a lot of things going on in the next couple of weeks. So the timing of this for JJ Keller, perfect timing. It's a really rich time to be holding this event because there's a lot going on in the childcare space.
I was just gonna say, we welcome partners. We are looking to engage, and it's hard work. This is, as we said, very complex, but we need more brains and more people working in this space.
Yeah. Could you speak to the Michigan solution that you talked about, the tri funding or whatever that appropriate term is, in terms of like a comparable, what did they learn, and is there any lessons that you think could take hold here?
From what I know, Michigan has really been working in this early care and education space for over 20 years. We're fortunate to work with Erin Watson is her name. She is the facilitator and has her own consulting firm called Weaving Change. And Erin has strong relationships and partnerships with folks in Michigan that have been developing. So we've been able to learn about the tri-share model. I'm going to use my words on this because there's certainly, I can get more information to you in more detail. What I think is really exciting and interesting about that tri-share model is that they're trying to bring people together and looking at innovative ways to try to identify how to share these costs. The program itself, I understand, as in when you are starting to bring in new programs, there have been some challenges with implementation things, right? Paperwork and how are you engaging with people. So I believe that like any, it's a very positive movement. It will continue to evolve and continue to flesh out. I think it does lend to Wisconsin looking at some of these economic development partnerships. And when we talk about funding streams and how to pull things together, it is an example that we can share in some of these additional outreach and engagement opportunities. So happy to share what other information we can get for you. Also, I'm just going to quickly, Michigan also has, Kent County, Michigan has been able to do a voter approved fund where they have set up, again, a community fund, a children's community fund. I don't think I'm mistaking. I think it's like $6 million. That might be a little high. $600,000. I'm not sure what the number is. Bear with me. However, this pot of money that they have for their children's fund, it's for childcare, it's for family home visits, birth to 5. They're doing some really innovative programming as well at that local and county level. So we can learn a great deal from other states, but the one specific point that I will make is that there is significant state engagement and investment of state GPR dollars in other states that are doing this program.
Thank you. It is 10 o'clock, and I think that's a good point to land on. Philanthropy can only do so much. I know there's more funders in the room here. And some of the things we learned about what Ohio was doing yesterday. That was $1 million for one county in Ohio for a year that a philanthropist donated to give childcare, full-time childcare workers an extra $400 a month. $1 million. That's not sustainable unless we have a public-private partnership. That's why advocacy and all the work and passion of everybody in this room is so really important, because we all need to come to the table. We all need to be part of the solution. And the Women's Fund is thrilled that you're all here. We will be sending out an email to all of you afterwards with some links, some of the resources we talked about. Please follow and go to Greater Fox Valley Childcare Alliance. Their newsletters are fabulous as far as what's going on in other states, what's going on in our state, how you can get involved. So that should be your first stop. We'll have that link in the email later on this afternoon. There is a survey. If you don't mind filling out the survey before you leave, we would appreciate that. We know that sometimes when people get back to their desks and I get an email with the survey, it kind of goes unread. But so if you want to fill out your survey, we'd appreciate that. And we will hopefully see you all at our next Women's Fund event, which is called Spotlight. This is a celebration of all the impact of the Women's Fund, all of our grantees, donors, volunteers. So we'll have a little more fun at this one. Thank you so much to our panel, Lynn and Suzanne, everybody, for just really sharing your story and being real and being vulnerable and to your great questions. And please stay involved. Please stay in contact with us, with the Alliance. And choose a way, choose an avenue that works best for you of how you can move this issue forward, because it's possible. We've seen it, right? It's happening. Other states are doing this work. We don't have to reinvent some of the wheels that we can really learn a lot. So thank you all. Juice boxes, take one before you go. And if you have any questions, if the panel could stay around for a couple minutes, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Have a good day.